Thank you for all coming out so early in the morning. And yeah, it's a little awkward seeing my picture blown up that big. It feels like I'm walking into a Seoul subway station where you see a big K-pop star banner advertisement celebrating their birthday. Yeah, so I will move on to the next slide. So today is I'm going to talk about the hip-hype reality of the Korean wave, a case study on the worldwide rise of K-pop music. Just to kind of give you a brief background of how I even got here. About 30 years ago, I had first come to Korea to study, supposedly, apparently, study Korean language, but more importantly, I was supposed to go to graduate school at Yonsei University, and I ended up dropping out of grad school a week before classes started because I had met somebody at a club who said that he was going to launch a music channel in Korea. I didn't believe him at first, but it turned out to be true, and I ended up interviewing with him. And I ended up getting a job at the first music channel in Korea called Mnet. And at the time, the word K-pop didn't exist. The Korean music that was being played at the time was a kind of Korean-style country music called trot, or ballads. And at the time, the Korean music market was about 80 to 90% Western pop music, and the remaining 10 to 20% was just called gayo, which was literally translated as popular Korean music. But fast forward 30 years later, currently the Korean music market is about 80 to 90% local Korean music, and Western pop music is maybe 10 to 20% at most. And what's really interesting is right now, as I speak on this stage today, the best-selling music artist in the world, BTS, is Korean. The biggest girl band in the world is Korean. The best-selling albums in the world are from Korea. And for those of you who really want to go there, the TV show Masked Singer is #1 in many markets in the world. That show and that format is also from Korea. So the point of what I'm trying to talk about today is sort of the how, where, what, and more importantly, why Hallyu has sort of become the new buzzword in Hollywood. South Korea. If you're looking on a map, punch in these numbers and you'll find South Korea. How did we get to this term Hallyu, the Korean wave? Hallyu is actually not a Korean word, it's actually Chinese. And in the 90s, the Chinese media had coined the phrase Hallyu to reflect this growing surge of Korean pop culture that was starting to get popular across Asia. And as much as people talk about Korean pop culture and Hallyu, I thought that this quote pretty much summarized it best. Since all of you have very intelligent kids attending this school, I figure you guys can read this, so I won't read it out loud. But Hallyu, the Korean wave, it's the idea that the South Korean pop culture has grown in prominence to become a major driver of global culture, seen in everything from Korean dramas on Netflix to Korean skincare regimens dominating the cosmetics industry to delicious Korean tacos on your favorite local menu. And at the heart of Hallyu is the ever-growing popularity of K-pop, short, of course, for Korean pop music. Now, we all know about the busyness of Korean pop culture, online, on screen, on air. But how is this busyness a business? If we take a step back, and this is the part where if I had pursued my original career plans of being a college professor, this would be the slide I would start with. But Asia, APAC, Asia Pacific region, it's about 60% of the world's population. It's the #1 economic bloc. But more importantly, for today's topic, it's the #2 entertainment and media region in the world. A lot of people have a hard time understanding just how big Korea is. When they find it on the map, they have a really hard time figuring out how big it is. Korea is actually very small. In terms of sheer land size, it's ranked 107 in the world. It's basically about the size of Scotland and Wales combined. For those of you from Europe, about the size of Portugal. And for those of you from North America, it's about the size of Florida. In terms of population, Korea is also not really that big. It's number 28 in the world. It's roughly the size of England in terms of population, with about 51.3 million people. And in terms of economy, Korea right now has the 10th wealthiest, largest economy in the world. Slightly bigger, or actually say slightly smaller, but even with Australia and New Zealand, also known as Australasia. So how did a country as small as Korea become not only the third largest entertainment media market in Asia Pacific region, but more importantly, it's the 7th largest entertainment and media market in the world? These are the numbers up here. For those of you with a photographic memory, these are big numbers. But essentially, the entertainment and media market in Korea is approximately a $64.1 billion industry. But what's more impressive is Korean pop culture, Korean wave, Korean pop culture exports is a $10.6 billion industry, and it turns out it's the second biggest South Korean consumer goods export. We all know Hyundai and Kia sells really well worldwide, but what a lot of people don't know is pop culture, TV, film, music, video games, is the second largest export out of Korea. More so than electronics, more so than mobile phones, pop culture. And what is driving the Korean wave is actually video games. Video games are actually the biggest Korean pop culture exports out of Korea. But the most important thing to note is the fastest growing exports, pop culture exports out of Korea is actually music. From 2019 to 2023, it's projected on average that the Korean music exports will be growing at a 9.4% rate for the next 2 years. Now, because Korean pop culture industries is such an important export engine for the Korean economy, the Korean government does meticulous research and analysis of how big this market is. Similar to cars and electronics, pop culture also gets a very close look from the Korean government. And according to recent Korean government research, Hallyu, Korean wave, Korean pop culture fans can be found in 108 markets worldwide, with approximately 156.6 million highly related fan club members, and the growth rate of fan club members from 2012 to 2021, on average, year to year. CAGR is not a boy band name, it's for compound annual growth rate, but it's at 36.9% on average year on year for the past 10 years. And as a result, when it comes to perception, currently the reality is the impact of Korean pop culture has done wonders for the South Korean national brand, national image. And according to Monocle magazine, Korea is now the number 2 soft power country in the world. And if you look, I'm really bad with these lights. Here we go. Korea jumped 13 places in the rankings. The concept in terms of soft power was actually conceived by a professor named Joseph Nye. And the idea is that there are different types of power that different countries can exert. Obviously economic power, political power, But more and more these days, there has been an emphasis and attention on soft power. And that usually, or actually it always includes this idea of pop culture and pop culture exports impact on the national image and national economy. So perception-wise, right now, South Korea is considered number 2 in the world, behind Germany in terms of soft power. Now, to get an understanding of how big the K-pop music market is, I'm going to show a bunch of numbers up here that might scare some of you because it'll look like math class. But in terms of understanding how big the Korean music market is, it's not big, it's massive. Currently, Korea has the 3rd largest live music market in the Asia-Pacific region, behind Japan and Australia, but just the tiny country of Korea. Again, as I mentioned to you, it's the 107th largest country in the world. The live music market is actually bigger than the entire live music market of Latin America. And when it comes to recorded music, whether it's digital music or physical music such as CDs or LPs, etc., Korea is behind Japan as the number 2 recorded music market in the Asia-Pacific region. And again, the South Korean music market alone is bigger than the entire recorded music market of Latin America. In terms of rankings, South Korea is currently the 15th largest live music market in the world, but it's bigger than the entire Southeast Asia region. It's bigger than all of the Latin America region. And in terms of revenue generated, South Korea generates more revenues in the live music market than China. And over the next, until 2025, starting next year as well, Korea is going to be moving up the rankings to number 12. In terms of the recorded music market, during COVID, Korea actually had a fantastic year. The growth between 2019 to 2020, Korea had the number 1 growth rate in the world. During the height of COVID, the South Korean music market experienced 44.8% year-on-year growth. And as a result, it's been holding steady as the 6th largest music market in the world, bigger than China, bigger than Latin America, and bigger than the entire Southeast Asia region. But what's more impressive is physical music being CDs and LPs, and sometimes even cassettes, but mostly CDs. Korea has surged to become the 3rd largest physical music market in the world, and again, has the honor and distinction of having the number 1 growth rate at 85.9% year-on-year growth. Korea has emerged as the 3rd largest physical music market in the world, and when we just look at CDs, Korea is currently the 2nd biggest CD market in the world. Japan is number 1. Korea has actually surpassed the United States in terms of annual CD sales. Videos. Koreans make great music videos. They also love to watch a lot of YouTube and stream videos. And as a result, South Korea is not only 8th largest streaming video market in the world, but again, the number 1 market in the world for year-on-year growth. From 2019 to 2020, South Korea experienced over 200% annual growth. And streaming audio, the streaming music market. Korea is currently the 6th largest streaming music market in the world and has continuously and consistently always had a very healthy growth rate. Again, during the height of COVID, their growth rate, South Korea's growth rate, was slightly ahead of the worldwide average at 23.6%. Now, Korea is a very unique market because it's the only market in the world that not only experienced growth in digital music, but more importantly, growth in physical music sales. And currently, again behind Japan, Korea is the number 2 music market in Asia for revenue per capita, for physical and digital music revenues. But again, having the distinction of having the fastest growth rate in Asia, and more importantly, the fastest growth rate worldwide. If you really want to drill down on the numbers, when it comes to digital music, South Koreans spend quite a bit of money on average per year, about $16.67. But more importantly, in just the growth, South Korea, again, during the height of COVID, was spending more money than anywhere else in the world. So now that we've taken a look at the local Korean K-pop music market, let's focus on the K-pop export market. This is a little bit of K-pop history that you will probably not likely find on Wikipedia, so I'm going to give it to you here straight. When people want to sort of pinpoint who the pioneers were in this K-pop export boom, it's actually not boy bands and it's actually not girl bands. It's these three particular artists. In the late 90s, there was a electronic dance music duo known as Clone. I know for some of the mothers out there, how many of you remember Clone? Raise your hands. There we go. Yours is halfway up. Don't be ashamed, come on. So, these guys were phenomenal. A little bit of a funny backstory on how they got big. There was a Hong Kong singer who really liked their performance and their dancing, and she asked them to appear in her music video. And Clone appeared in the music video and absolutely, completely stole all the attention away from the female singer. Everybody was focused on who were those two guys in the back. And Rock Records, which was a Taiwanese record label, just decided quickly to sign them because Clone was already big in Korea. But because of this cameo appearance in a music video for a Hong Kong music artist, they quickly became the biggest, not just Korean, but Asian act in the late 90s. Their music still sounds great today, but an unfortunate accident happened. The guy wearing the mask, he unfortunately got in a motorcycle accident and was paralyzed from the neck down. And so right at the height of their popularity, just as they were about to break big, because I was working at MTV at the time, we had just sent them to the MTV Video Music Awards in New York. Soon afterwards, he got in a very tragic motorcycle accident. And so that first surge stopped because of a motorcycle accident. The second big artist that everybody needs to know is this teenage girl named Boa. She did what was considered the impossible. She was able to go to Japan and conquer the Japanese charts. The idea of going #1 in the US was considered at that time an impossibility. But for many people, the idea of going into the #2 music market in the world in Japan and going #1 was also considered an impossibility. But it was a teenage girl named Boa who broke that barrier and became one of the most popular music artists in Japan. And 2002 really for the music industry was a magical year because not only was Korea and Japan co-hosting the World Cup, but more importantly, that was the year Boa, as a teenage girl, went #1 on both the Korean and Japanese music charts. And then the third band is important to note, is Epic High. How many of you know who Epic High is? Raise your hands. Okay. Technically, they are the first Korean music artists to go #1 in North America. Full disclosure, I worked with Epic High, and this was an album that we put out with them on Apple iTunes. And they had just finished a US tour. First time ever a Korean music artist had sold out a nationwide US tour. And they followed up that tour with this album release. and it went #1 on the US Apple iTunes Hip Hop Rap Album chart. It was the first time ever a Korean artist had ever hit #1 on any American music chart. And as a testament to not only the talent, but also their longevity, they're currently playing at Coachella this weekend in California. But yes, if anyone wants to ask and anyone wants to know who was the first Korean act to go #1 in the US, it was not a boy band, it was not a girl band, it wasn't Psy, it wasn't BTS, it was Epic High. Now soon after Epic High went #1 in the US, we started seeing other Korean music artists hitting #1 on the US charts, on the Apple iTunes music charts. The next big act was a bit of a surprise. It was the really soft-spoken, kind of shy member of, arguably at the time, one of the biggest boy bands in Korea, Big Bang. Taeyang was the very soft-spoken, kind of shy, but obviously very talented R&B singer of Big Bang. And of all the members who went solo, he happened to be the first to go #1 in Canada, and he got as high as #2 in the US on the R&B Soul album chart. Soon afterwards, in 2011, the next Korean artist that broke big in North America was Park Jae-bum, J Park. He again hit #2 in the US and hit #1 in Canada, again on the R&B Soul album chart. I don't know what it is with Canada and K-pop, but they seem to love it just a little more than Americans. And then the next act that started making headway and making waves in the US was an R&B trio known as Asiatics. They too went #1 on the R&B Soul album chart. So we started seeing in the North American music market an acceptance of, for some reason, urban music, hip-hop, rap, R&B, soul music into the North American market. But at the same time, boy bands and girl bands were also starting to make their move in the North America market. In 2010, 21 hit #1 on the hip-hop rap album chart. In 2012, on the electronic album chart, the girl band FX went #1 both in the US and in Canada. And then we started seeing a big move from Big Bang. They did, for the first time, a top 10 appearance, not on a genre chart, but on the overall pop album chart on Apple iTunes in both US and Canada. So in 2012, we started seeing Korean artists charting higher and higher and higher in North America. And so for many of us in the industry, we were thinking, it's going to be a girl band, it's going to be a boy band. It could possibly maybe be a hip-hop artist or an R&B artist that's going to break North America, that's going to break the world market. But lo and behold, ladies and gentlemen, that was not to be. It was this guy, the most unexpected breakthrough global superstar, Psy, in 2012. Nobody saw this coming. Psy, to his credit, was one of the biggest Korean music performers, biggest Korean music artists for at least 10 years. But no one saw this coming. And again, just kind of a funny story on how no one saw this coming. There's a very famous US music magazine called Spin Magazine, and they sent a reporter to Korea to write an article about K-pop and the Korean music industry. And I met with the reporter after he had just finished watching a concert that was produced and hosted and starring YG Entertainment music artists. And the reporter was telling me and giving me highlights of what he'd seen. And he said, yeah, you know, I saw Big Bang. They were impressive. And I saw 21. They're really good. And yeah, I saw some of their other hip-hop acts, and they were really great. But the one that got my attention was Psy. But the YG Entertainment representative that was escorting this report was like, oh, no, Psy's just for Korea. No, look at these other bands. But it turns out Psy was the one that literally and figuratively broke the internet with Gangnam Style. But Psy was by no means a flash in the pan. He was no means a one-hit wonder. The impact that Psy had on the music industry is something that we have to acknowledge, accept, but more importantly, respect. Because of Psy and Gangnam Style, YouTube views of K-pop music videos tripled worldwide, tripled. And Korea and K-pop has not looked back since. And more importantly, is these YouTube music videos, viewers are not Korean. 90% of the YouTube views of K-pop music videos were coming from outside of Korea and straight through. And this was data that was collected by the Korean government and has been verified and supported and amplified by even YouTube. Currently, almost 90% of YouTube views of K-pop are from outside of Korea. Now, in terms of how big K-pop became soon afterwards, is the IFPI, which is the International Federation of the Phonographic Industry. That's a mouthful, but essentially it is the music industry global association. For those of you who are football fans, the IFPI is essentially like the FIFA of the music industry. But when they put a music listening report together in 2019, surveying music listeners from 16 to 64 years old in 21 international music markets that represented 92.6% of the recorded music revenues in the world, K-pop emerged as the 7th most popular music genre in the world. Another important tool in the export and expansion of K-pop is Twitter. And last year, Twitter did some data analysis on their hashtags. And it turns out the #1 market, the biggest market of K-pop fans, is actually not even Korea. Indonesia is the biggest K-pop music fan market in the world. Japan is #2. The Philippines is #3. South Korea, the home of K-pop, has only the 4th largest K-pop fan market in the world. And again, last year, Spotify launched in Korea, and they too did a survey of the popularity of K-pop worldwide. And it turns out that K-pop is not only popular across Asia, but more importantly, is growing popular beyond Asia. Currently, the #1 market for new K-pop fan growth is the United States. But what's shocking is #2. The home of Bollywood, India. India has fallen in love with K-pop and Korean pop culture. India is now the 2nd biggest, fastest growing K-pop music market in the world. So currently, 40% of the top 10 new K-pop fans are coming from across Asia, but more importantly, 60% of the new K-pop fans are coming from beyond Asia, namely specifically the United States and the big markets in Europe, such as Germany, the United Kingdom, and France. And also what's surprising as well is K-pop is blowing up big in Latin America, notably Brazil and Mexico. So really right now, K-pop is now the new pop music. In the 2021 report on the music industry for 2020, 15% of the best-selling albums in the world came from South Korea, making South Korea tied with the United Kingdom as the #2 music exporter in the world. I think these gentlemen don't need an explanation as to who they are, but just to read the fine print, in 2020, in the top 20 global album all format chart, BTS had 3 of the best-selling albums in the world that year, and Blackpink came in strong at #12. But BTS had the #1 best-selling album, the #4 best-selling album, And 2 years running, BTS, not only for 2020, but also 2021, was considered the biggest best-selling music artist in the world. So how did K-pop go from possibly maybe being a fad to a full-on phenomena? I deliberately misspelled phenomena so that I could slip in the word fan, because the phenomena is very much fan-focused and fan-driven. Because Korea is the 6th largest music market in the world, of the dozens to hundreds of reasons why K-pop blew up big worldwide, I figured for time's sake and convenience sake and short attention span sake, I'll just stick to 6. But the number one reason, or the first reason, that K-pop went global is what's called glocalization. What do I mean by glocalization? Glocalization is a hybrid mashup word for global and local. Glocalization. And one of the things that K-pop, the Korean music industry, did not only first, but bigger and better, is something as boring and as mundane as what we call metadata. Bilingual music metadata. You're probably asking, what is metadata? Metadata is the information on the artist's name, the album title, and the song title. It's the information that pops up when you listen to Korean music or you watch a Korean music video. One of the things that Korea and the K-pop music industry did differently than Japan or in China is they made their music easily accessible locally, regionally, and globally with something as simple as bilingual music data. This is an artist that we worked with for many, many years, Jay Park, also known as Park Jae-bum. And one of the reasons why he was able to consistently and still finds consistent chart success is that all of his songs that have Korean titles have an English translation side by side. So for instance, with this particular album, which also went #1 on the iTunes US chart, 사실은, the truth is. And the truth is that anyone inside and outside of South Korea can easily find these Korean and English song titles. When I first started exporting Korean music in 2009, I studied how other Asian music artists and Asian music markets were exporting, because it was obvious at the time you could not find Asian music, whether it was from Japan, Korea, or China, on any of the major international music stores or services. And what I discovered was record labels, namely Western record labels, were not registering music properly. With Japan, J-pop, or C-pop, Chinese pop music, or even K-pop, Korean pop music, it was either all in Korean, it was the Korean word spelled in English. So for instance, let's just say, I love you. The song title would appear in Korean as 사랑해, or they would put the music out as 사랑해, but spelled S-A-R-A-N-G-H-E, or they wrote I love you, so that the Korean music fans would not even know what the actual translation is. And so a lot of Asian music was lost in translation. And at the time when I was starting to export music, I was traveling a lot to music conferences and clients all over Asia. And I was struggling with this issue, how to overcome this language barrier. And of all places, it hit me in Starbucks. Because in every market I went to in Asia, Japan, China, Southeast Asia, I had no problems ordering Starbucks everywhere in Asia. And the reason being is when you go to Starbucks, you have the coffee name, local language, and then English, side by side. And that's when it hit me. If this works for Starbucks, this is how I want my stars to make bucks worldwide. Bilingual metadata. So yeah, credit and kudos to Starbucks for opening my eyes. And then I started seeing things differently. As you go to the airport, whether you're going from Narita Airport in Japan to come to the Incheon Airport in Korea, if you look at the signs in the airport, and if you look at the signs as you go into the airport, bilingual metadata, local language, English. And so I figured, if this is how people are going to move from point A to point B to travel, this should work for music as well, and it did. The next reason that Korean music has sold well in terms of globalization, I never figured out why lingua franca, which is translated as the global language, it's, I believe, Latin or French, but the lingua franca is actually English. And so one of the things that we started seeing in the K-pop music industry was multilingual, multicultural, and multinational music artists were not the exception, they were becoming the rule. They were not an anomaly, they were becoming normal. They were no longer an option, it was becoming standard that members in Korean music bands had to be multilingual, multicultural, and now we start seeing more and more multinational music artists. So when we look at Psy, one of the reasons he was able to go #1 and stay #1 and basically be the meme of 2012 was the fact that not only was he singing and rapping in Korean, but when he was on the red carpet or doing interviews, he could speak English, and that was big. With BTS, one of the reasons why they're not just the biggest boy band in the world, they're actually the biggest band in the world right now at this moment. One of the main reasons is language. They release their songs in Korean, obviously, English, we all know, but also in Japanese. Last year, BTS did not release an album, and yet they still had the 3rd best-selling album in the world. And the reason is that in Japan, all their Japanese songs were compiled into a greatest hits album, and that became the 3rd biggest best-selling album in the world. Just the Japanese market alone was responsible for that. And then last but not least, my daughter's favorite band, Blackpink. Not only can they sing and rap and speak Korean, English, but also Japanese and Thai for one of the members. And currently, this is good trivia, the most popular K-pop girl band member in the world is actually the Thai woman, Lisa. She is currently the biggest female K-pop star. She's not Korean, but yet she's loved in Korea, but more importantly, loved worldwide. So that's becoming the new normal, that a non-Korean K-pop star is not odd, it's not weird. If anything, it's normal. One of the other reasons why K-pop found success globally, this is something that's been talked about widely by the media and by academics, is social media savvy. When it comes to using international social media networks, Korean artists, Korean management companies have been amazing at utilizing global platforms to go global. And this is important because one of the reasons why J-pop artists, Japanese artists struggled to go abroad is many of them used local social media platforms. And in China, one of the reasons why Chinese artists have been struggling to go global is YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram are banned in China. You can't access it, you can't use it. And so for a lot of Chinese artists, for them to go global, using global platforms is actually not an option. So with Psy, he was obviously a case study on how to use YouTube to go global. And for 5 straight years, he had the #1 most viewed music video in the world. Briefly, there were some Latin music artists that bumped him from #1, but Korea has again reclaimed the #1 most viewed music video in the world with, can anyone guess what that video is? Anybody? You just nodded your head. What is the #1 music video right now in the world? Okay, I'm gonna give away the answer. It's Baby Shark, also from Korea. But currently, in terms of Guinness Book of World Records related to YouTube, Korean K-pop acts dominate those records. In terms of, I believe, the top 10 most viewed videos in 24 hours, 7 out of the top 10, I believe, are K-pop artists, mostly BTS and Blackpink. In terms of the most views in 24 hours, again, in all time, BTS has that record and is consistently breaking their own records every few weeks, every few months. And again, speaking of BTS, BTS from 2017 until now, they are the most tweeted music artist in the world, 5 years running. And currently, Blackpink on Instagram is the most followed music band in the world. And again, one of the interesting things about Blackpink is the individual members also have massive followers on Instagram. And so when you combine their individual numbers with their band numbers, arguably they're probably the most followed music artists in the world right now on Instagram. And another reason why Korea and K-pop has gone global is collaborations. Psy sort of showing some of the early signs of what international creative collaborations can do for expanding their fan base. When Gangnam Style got big, Psy was able to reach out to and collaborate with one of his childhood heroes and icons, MC Hammer. And so as Psy was promoting Gangnam Style, MC Hammer basically came out of retirement to get on stage with Psy, and that introduced a whole new audience base for Psy, vis-a-vis through collaborating with MC Hammer. Once you have Gangnam Style, it's really hard to top that or beat that, but his follow-up videos did incredibly, arguably insanely well. And one of those videos, again, he collaborated with Snoop Dogg. I'm curious as to how the translator is going to translate Snoop Dogg, but yes, Snoop Dogg. But again, in order to sort of help Psy go global, Psy was one of the first Korean artists to team up and hook up with a talent agency in the US and also with talent management. SB stands for Scooter Brown. Psy was actually at the height of Gangnam Style represented by Justin Bieber's manager and was also one of the reasons why Psy was able to go mainstream. I think most people know who BTS are, but BTS was very successful in building their career, building their status, building their fan base vis-a-vis through very high profile, very high powered collaborations with artists such as the Chainsmokers, Steve Aoki, and recently with Coldplay. And again, one of the reasons why BTS was able to go further and farther was they started working with major international labels such as Sony and Universal Music. And last but not least, Blackpink, who's currently recording a new album as we speak. They've collaborated with some iconic music artists such as Lady Gaga, Ariana Grande, and Cardi B. And again, they too are collaborating and working with Universal Music. So creative collaborations have had a huge impact on expanding the global success of K-pop music artists. But it's not just in the creative space, we're also seeing the collaborations in the commercial space as well. And as a result, Korean music companies are now expanding their global influence through commercial collaborations, international commercial collaborations. Just over the past few months, there have been over the past year, there have been 3 huge announcements, deals that have have come into play. One of them is CJ which is one of the biggest TV networks, production companies in Korea. They've teamed up with Endemol Shine, who makes a lot of audition shows and reality shows, and HBO Max. They have decided that they are going to recreate and export the K-pop audition show formula to Latin America. So very soon we're going to see K-pop style Latin American boy bands coming out in 2022, 2023. At the same time, if we shift further north to Hollywood, SM Entertainment and MGM announced that they were going to start a talent competition show to look for a K-pop boy band made of Korean and also non-Korean members to get training in Korea, again, exporting not just the format, but more importantly, the formula. And last but not least, one of the biggest deals in the music industry happened when Hybe, known as formerly as Big Hit Entertainment, they bought a company called Ithaca Holdings. Ithaca Holdings is the home company of Justin Bieber, Ariana Grande, J Balvin, and one of the biggest country music labels in the US, Big Machine Records. For nearly $1 billion, Hybe acquired one of the biggest management companies in the world that currently represents some of the biggest pop stars in the world. And as a result, Hybe also struck not one, not two, but 3 joint ventures with Universal Music. One of them being for their live streaming music, live concert solutions, and also again with Universal Music. They too are currently in the process of scouting, recruiting, and soon training new boy bands. The second big factor on why K-pop went global is this concept, this word, this phrase, culture technology. If you look at these 2 words side by side, it actually kind of sort of doesn't make sense. These are almost 2 very different concepts and terms, but yet in Korea, this actually makes a lot of sense. Not just common sense, but more importantly, business sense. What do I mean by cultural technology? There's a bit of a debate as to who coined the phrase. There are professors at KAIST who believe they coined the phrase, but it was actually, I believe, Chairman Lee Isuman of S Entertainment who introduced this concept and this word of culture technology to describe his business model. And why it's relevant is because of this. Korea, when we look at the information and communication technology, it's actually the #1 wired and wireless country in the world. What do I mean by wired and wireless? Because of basically in South Korea, youth culture, pop culture, and digital culture are actually one and the same. Because culture and technology are so intertwined and so interconnected, culture and technology has really been able to power and drive Korea into being what's considered the #1 digerati society. Digerati is a term, basically, it's like basically digital elites. Currently, South Korea has the #1 internet market in Asia, has the #1 mobile internet market in Asia. It's the #1 smartphone market in the world in terms of smartphone ownership. Korea is the #1 and more importantly #2 worldwide social media market in the world in terms of social media usage, percentage of population. And not surprisingly, Korea is not only #1 in Asia, but #1 in the world in terms of e-commerce, in terms of how much people spend online or through their mobile phones. And given this base, it should not come as a surprise why Korea has such a vibrant local, but more importantly, global music market. Korea is #1 in the world when it comes to paid subscribers. Basically, Koreans don't use piracy sites. 98.9% of people using streaming music services are paying for it. On average, South Koreans, almost 80% of the 80% of the consumer population is spending something on a digital music service, ranging from anywhere between $4 to $16 a month. Nearly 80% are paying for this much per month. More importantly, is Koreans do a lot of shopping online, but especially for physical music, when it comes to CDs or DVDs or LPs or cassettes or even USB drives, almost 60% of those purchases are also done online. And again, as an extension of South Korea's culture, technology, lifestyle, and this idea of the population being very digitally advanced and digital elite, what we're starting to see is Korea has now developed almost the next phase, the new wave of social media. And it's called fandom platforms. And what do I mean by fandom platforms? Currently, right now, the two most popular social media platforms for the Korean music industry, it's not Instagram, it's not Facebook, it's not Twitter, it's not YouTube, it's not Twitch, it's kind of sort of TikTok, but it's actually these two platforms, made in Korea, but not for Koreans. Weverse, which is something that was developed by Hybe, the home to BTS, they have launched a fan community platform called Weverse. What's really fascinating is Weverse has a user base in 235 countries, but 80 to 90% of those users are not Korean. They're international users. And in Weverse, you almost get the best of every other existing digital social media platform, all wrapped up like kimbap in this app. Live streaming events, exclusive content, subscriptions, and most importantly, shopping. Now, I'm sure many of you have heard about Web3, NFTs, blockchain, metaverses. When we talk about metaverse right now, the fastest growing metaverse platform in the world is actually from Korea, Zepeto. Zepeto is something that was developed by Naver and has many of the top Korean music companies such as Hybe, YG, and I believe JYP Entertainment all involved. Zepeto is the #1 K-pop fan metaverse platform. It has already 300 million subscribers. 95% of those users are international users hailing from 200 countries. But this is the thing that's got fashion brands excited. 80% of the users are teens, and nearly 70% of the users are female. So right now, Gucci, Nike, any luxury brand or any lifestyle brand currently is rushing to open stores and have a presence on Zepeto. And again, when we talk about culture and technology and its impact within Korea, it's no surprise that Korea was able to produce and able to host not only the biggest but best, but the most profitable, the most revenue-generating paid live streaming music events during COVID. And again, BTS has broken so many Guinness Book of World Records that I think the Guinness Beer Company needs to send these boys a few cases of beer. But one of the things that they broke the record for was the most paid viewers, most paid concert goers in this live streaming music space. The #3 reason that K-pop has gone global is actually something very local. Premium DSP. Okay, you're wondering, what's DSP? But I figured if I put G-Dragon, everyone would pay attention. Korea, as I mentioned to you before, is the 6th largest streaming music market in the world. But when it comes to people paying for streaming music services, Korea is actually #4 in the world. The Korean population pays almost as much as those in Great Britain, but more importantly, the paid user base, the paid subscribers in Korea is 1.4 times bigger than Japan. More Koreans pay for streaming music than Japan. And when we look at the streaming music market in Korea, it turns out Korea is one of the few and one of the rare markets where international DSPs, international digital service providers, such as Apple and Spotify, they're not even in the top 6 services in Korea. #1 is Melon, 2 is Genie, #4 is Flow, 5 is Vibe, #6 is Bugs, all Korean companies. How does this and why is this even relevant to this idea of K-pop going global? It's very relevant because when we look at why companies like Apple Music and Spotify struggle in the Korean music market, it's because what they're called basic DSPs. They're just basic digital streaming platforms. All they provide is just digital audio. But when we look at what Korean DSPs provide, it's a whole nother ballgame. Korean DSPs are what we call premium DSPs. They are diverse services providers. Not only are they providing a content platform for digital audio and video services, they're also premium DSP because they are a content producer. They provide artist services. For many Korean music artists, they can do direct deals to get funding from these music platforms. Many management companies can often get investment from these digital music platforms. And as a result, this is one of the reasons why Korean music artists are able to produce original content, is because they can get funding from these music platforms. And to go one step further, these particular premium DSPs are also content providers. They will do the marketing and promotions, but more importantly, they will do the local, regional, and international distribution for these music artists. And as a result, within Korea, 4/5 of the local streaming music market share in terms of content platforms is dominated by local players. If we look at the top three, Melon, Genie, and Flow combined, they make up about 80% of the content platform market. Why is this relevant? If we look at the next slide and keep going back and forth, when we look at the content producer and content provider market, if we look at the top 200 streaming songs in Korea, it is no coincidence 80%, 4/5 of that chart is dominated by the top three DSPs, who are also content producers and content providers. If we just look at Melon, they have 37.3% of the local DSP market share. It is no coincidence when we look at them as a content producer and content provider, they have 36% market share. There's a direct correlation. And as a result of these premium DSPs, through their content investments, they actually end up generating either up from 1/8 to 1/3 of their revenues from being a content producer and a content provider. So this is an incredibly innovative business model coming from Korea for Korean music artists. And as a result, Korea is actually the #1 independent music market in the world. Currently, when we look at the top three recorded music markets in Asia, namely Japan, Korea, and China, 2/3 to 5/6 of the revenues come from local independent music. What do I mean by independent? So these are the top three. Korea, China, and Japan are the three biggest independent music markets in the world. What do I mean by independent? Independent is another way of saying a music artist is not produced, developed, or distributed by who are considered the big three major labels, Universal, Sony, and Warner Music. And globally, these big three labels have about 2/3 market share. However, when we look at Asia, Sony, Universal, and Warner are not considered big at all, nor are they considered even major. They are lucky. For instance, in Korea, those big three majors only have about 15% market share in Korea combined. Sony, Universal, and Warner, and any other market in the world, each would have about 15% or more market share. But in Korea combined, they're lucky to get about 15% market share. And again, when we look at Korea, the second largest recorded music market in Asia, but more importantly, the #1 indie music market in the world, if we look at the charts and digital music, nearly 80% is considered Korean independent music. And when we look at physical music, 96% of the market is indie. This one is something that's the investors and the stock market look at. They want to know, why are Korean music artists so successful locally, regionally, and globally? It actually might have to do with the dance moves, might have to do with the lyrics, might have to do with the music. It actually has more to do with the business model. In Korea, and again, this comes back full circle to this idea of culture technology, the concept in the word full stack actually comes from the tech sector. Whenever there's a technology company looking for a programmer or engineer, the most desired person they want to hire is considered a full stack developer. Somebody from stage one all the way to the final stage that can develop a product or a service or an app. This tech industry business model has carried over into the culture, the pop culture industry. And what do I mean by that? When we want to study why K-pop stars are actually the biggest and most popular Asian pop stars in the world, it has to do with the business model. Top K-pop music companies have E-to-E, end-to-end synergies. They are integrated, hybrid, full-stack music companies. For every $1 million a K-pop music company will generate from selling recorded music, they will earn another $786,000 in artist management, almost another $1.3 million in live music, and nearly $850,000 on merchandising. Putting it another way, for the top K-pop music companies, music is not their main business. Music is actually a business card, because when we look at the total revenues of these top K-pop music companies, recorded music is only 1/4 of their total revenues. Most of the money is being made through merchandising, artist management, or live music. Nearly 3/4 of their revenues do not come from streaming music or selling CDs. But more importantly is when we break down the numbers further, the top K-pop music companies, JYP, YG, SM Entertainment, if we look at their total revenues, half of their revenues come from overseas. When we look at live music, again, this is pre-COVID, nearly 3/4 of their revenues came from overseas concerts. When we look at recorded music, nearly 1/3 of the revenues came from overseas. But when we look at total revenues, nearly half of the revenues of top Korean music companies are from overseas. And as a case study on the #1 music company in Korea at the moment, Hallyu, when we look at their worldwide, and WWW stands for online, when we look at their worldwide and their online exports over the past few years, and the reason I have all this data is all these top music companies are all publicly traded on the Korean Stock Exchange, and based on their investor relation reports, about 2/3 to 3/4 of Hallyu's revenues come from overseas. So, how big is the K-pop music industry? We're going to talk about K-poponomics. As I mentioned, not only are the top K-pop music companies, but also the top premium DSPs, music streaming services in Korea, all of them are publicly traded on KASDAQ, the Korean stock market. And when we look at the annual revenues of the top Korean music companies, red signifies management companies and blue signifies the music services, the DSPs. If we look, Universal Music makes nothing compared to every other major player in Korea. Universal Music is the biggest music company, record label in the world, but when it comes to Korea, they don't even make 1/10 of what Hallyu generates or what SM Entertainment generates. So Universal, Sony, and Warner are not very big in Korea. But to put it into more context, and this is something that unfortunately when I mention this at cocktail parties, people spill their drinks. When we look at the top performing K-pop music companies or premium DSPs, they generate more revenues annually than entire music markets. Hallyu and SM Entertainment annually generate more revenues than the entire music market of India. YG Entertainment or Kakao or Genie, they annually generate more revenues than the entire music market of Taiwan. And music management companies like JYP Entertainment, they make more money as a company than most of the Southeast Asian countries. And for people who not only want to spill their drinks, but potentially choke on their finger foods, when we take these numbers to Europe, these top K-pop music companies and premium DSPs are actually bigger than most of the North by Northwest European music markets. Hybe generates more money than the Netherlands. SM Entertainment alone generates more money than the entire music market of Sweden. And so in closing, when we talk about the innovation coming from Korea, the global genreification of K-pop, I think, can be summed up in the following way, in the following manner, with the following words. Korea, which has during COVID experienced the most music market growth in the world, happens to be powered by 6 unique market dynamics, which I have listed here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And these are the 6 key reasons why K-pop has found global success. And with that, I will end here. Thank you.
My question was more for, like in the future, like beyond, I think 2 years was your horizon that you looked at. So next generation of up-and-coming entertainers, what are they thinking about as far as how to break through globally?
That's a great question. But in terms of what the future of K-pop should like or could look like, it's a concept that I think makes people uncomfortable. But we may see K-pop sort of evolve like hip-hop, because when hip-hop first emerged, it was pretty much considered very much an African-American black music experience, but over time, it's become global. So it's not uncommon to see a white rapper or a Korean rapper or a Latin rapper. And so hip-hop has become global. We're already starting to see early signs that K-pop is also becoming global by the fact that many of the popular members of popular K-pop bands are non-Korean, and people are getting comfortable with that concept. And also the fact that Korean companies are not only exporting their artists, they're exporting their business model, they're exporting their formats, they're exporting their formulas. And so this idea of K-pop is not necessarily going to be a creative or artistic category. It could also be a commercial category as well. So the fact that there's this fascination on the Korean way, the Korean system, making its way into the Western markets, the international markets, is something that we're all paying attention to. And I think what makes Korea unique on driving this ambition is the fact that most of these top music companies are publicly traded on the stock market. And as a result, in order to constantly perform, you have to constantly innovate. You have to constantly improve business standards and practices. And so Korea has created, I think, a very fertile ecosystem that has allowed not just the artists, but the businesses to also go further and farther. And so as K-pop moves, it's obviously become more global, but we shouldn't just focus on who's on stage or who has the mic. We also may have to look at who's producing the shows and who's producing the music. There might be a good chance in the near future that it's not just a Korean artist, but it could be a Korean executive or it could be a Korean company behind the success of global music acts. I mean, to me, it blows my mind that Justin Bieber and Ariana Grande are technically employees of a Korean company. I never thought I'd see that day.
Actually, I always wondered why not many international artists are coming to Korea and giving live concerts. I'm originally from Germany and I lived here already 2015, so pre-pandemic. And in Germany, we really used a lot of international stars, even not in big cities they come even in smaller cities. But here, it's not very common. There is, like, every 3 years, maybe there's Coldplay. There are just a few artists coming to Korea. And I always wondered why. So is this one of the reasons maybe why K-pop or the Asian music bands are very popular here, because the international are not coming? Or, I don't know, I always wondered.
Oh, that's a great question and very observant. One of the reasons why it was hard to see a lot of international concerts It's actually infrastructure. One of the best things to happen to the live music industry was COVID. Because during the COVID years, many of the biggest venues were already scheduled to go under renovation or be rebuilt or just start groundbreaking to build. And many of those projects are either finishing or about to start. And so in the next few years, huge arenas specifically targeting not just local but international music acts are now being built. So Korea, Seoul, I should say, within the next 3 years is going to have as many huge venues as London. So in terms of 15, 20, 40,000 capacity arenas and stadiums and venues, they're happening right now. So there's going to be one called CJ Live City that's being built in Koyan with AEG. And just not too long ago, a few weeks ago, in one of the neighborhoods in Seoul, Seoul Arena is being built with Kakao Entertainment backing it. And at Olympic Park, some of these old sports venues are now being renovated to become live music venues, dedicated live music venues. And so that problem you recognized is actually being addressed, and we're going to see, I think, a significant rise in not just the quantity, but also the quality of international music events in Korea. Because one of the problems Korea had was they were huge, outdated, dilapidated sports venues or small clubs. There was nothing in the middle. But everything from middle-sized arenas to big-sized arenas to small clubs are all currently getting an overhaul right now with a lot of support from the city and the Korean government.
As a closet Blackpink fan,
You can say it. You're a blink.
I'm not ashamed.
You're a blink.
I'm not ashamed. When's the release date?
If I knew, I'd have to kill you, but I don't know, so I can't kill you. They're currently recording, I believe, in Los Angeles. And the rumor is they're also preparing for a world tour starting later this year and early next year. But all good rumors. But yeah, it is well known that they're recording new music right now. So I think if they're going to go on a world tour, I think it's safe to assume they're going to release a new EP or album sometime this year.
I'm a huge fan of BTS. They started creating songs in English recently, like Dynamite, Butter. Do you reckon, so when I listen to their English songs, I always have this question in my mind. Would you still consider their English songs as like part of K-pop, or would it be like a different genre? Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. Some people ask, if a Korean artist sings a song entirely in English, is it still K-pop? I think so, just because it happens to have some Korean element. One of the things that I've experienced over the years is often artists feel like they have to sing all their songs all in English. I actually tell them don't, because if they're not comfortable, it comes across pretty awful. And so, you know, it turns out in the same way that Latin music has gone very mainstream in America, people like that flavor. They like that little bit of difference because it gives it that uniqueness and that edge and that color. And people have gotten very comfortable listening to Korean. So if anything, I tell them, go Konglish. Whether it's 99% Korean, 1% English, or 80% Korean, 20% English. Use language like an instrument, whatever sounds good and is the best, go for it. But I do say, when you do interviews, speak in English so that you can tell the story and get fans and critics and media to fall in love with you. But when it comes to making music and performing, I think language is not as important. You just have to make really good music. And again, at the very minimum, just making sure the song titles are in Korean English, I think, is enough. But again, I look at the success of Latin music. They're always mixing Spanish and English. If it works for the Latin music scene, it should work for Korean and Asian music as well. I think one of the reasons why BTS released some of their biggest songs all in English was to really push the music industry to accept them. Because one of one of the things that critics would dismiss about BTS was, well, they're foreign band, they're boy band. In order to break America, no one really cares if it's not in English. So in some ways, BTS had said, look, we're breaking every record, and if you think you're going to hold language against us, fine. We'll go all English and let's see what happens. And we saw what happened. They had the best-selling songs of the year 2 years running. And so critics and haters can't use language as an excuse anymore because BTS, been there, seen it, done that in English, and they kill it in English. So now people are running out of reasons to discredit and hate BTS because they're just breaking every record. And if someone says language is a barrier, they break the barrier. I do think, though, that one of the examples I use with Korean artists is when they are struggling with what language to sing it in or how much is right. I play music from a band from Iceland called Sigur Rós, and I make them listen to it, and they're like, wow, this is beautiful, this is awesome. Are they singing in Icelandic? And I'm like, good try, but no. They just made up their own language. It sounds great, though. And I said, you know what? Somebody in Vietnam or Vienna or Vancouver, when they listen to your song in Korean, you could be their Sigur Rós. But what's really interesting is when Korean music artists put out music, and especially when it goes to YouTube, fans will often translate the lyrics into all the different languages. And so when you listen to the music, it just has to sound great. But the good news and the good thing about K-pop fans is they're so passionate, somebody will translate the lyrics. And often, you know, it's effective and kids can relate to the lyrics. And this is one of the reasons why BTS is so popular, is fans all over the world not only like the sound and like the music, they love the lyrics because they can relate to it. But often the lyrics are the translated ones, and they're very good translations too.
I heard the process of making idol stars, Korean idol stars, is quite severe. But I wonder if it is necessary to see such a way work in the future. And I heard they had a very hard time emotionally or any other way for their very early age. So that is my question.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I get this from a lot of friends who are parents because many of their children are kind of thinking, ooh, I might want to be a K-pop star. And they keep thinking, well, the only way to become a K-pop star is to go on audition show, get into a management company, and become a trainee, and somehow, you know, out of the 1,000 candidates, be that lucky one that gets picked to be in a boy band or a girl band. I hope the camera's not running, but I'll say it anyways. I'm not a big fan of the audition show process because what I believe should be a very organic, authentic process of training and learning music, which should take years, that process is compressed in a matter of weeks and months for entertainment. And it's very high stress, but it's also high ratings. And for me, on many levels, it bothers me that many people feel you have to go through this pressure cooker to somehow become a star. But the thing is that the audition shows have generally been very successful ways to find new stars. One of the most encouraging trends I see right now is currently audition shows for boy bands and girl bands, they no longer get the best or top TV ratings. People want more. They actually want different. So surprisingly, like indie rock audition shows get higher ratings, or trot audition shows get higher ratings. And so what it tells me is that the Korean TV audiences are getting burned out on just watching young men and young girls, young boys, young girls, basically doing a version of Survivor. And when we look at the success of boy bands and girl bands, one of the most encouraging trends, and I give credit due, I think BTS has also had a hand in this, the new standard of what's considered a star or an artist is no longer being good looking or a good voice or a good dancer. it actually has to do with being an artist. One of the reasons why BTS is so popular is they actually produce and write their own music. With Blackpink, all of those women actually play instruments. And so this idea, and if we look at the most popular solo artists, many of them at some point used to be in a boy band and girl band, but they broke out and broke through because they can actually write, compose, and produce music or play their own instruments, which I feel is the right way and the right thing to do. And so one of the things, and again, this is one of the reasons why I was happy to see bands like Epic High or J Park or Taeyong, is they're providing alternate pathways for aspiring artists to become successful, that you don't have to go through a factory model. You can actually study music. Many top Korean music artists went to great music schools, both in Korea and overseas. You'd be shocked by how many Berklee College of Music graduates are in the music industry. But one of the encouraging trends I'm starting to see is there's now becoming more and more emphasis on the professionalism of the music artists. And then the issue that you touched on, the exploitation of young men, young women in the system. The Korean government is very aware, and they've actually been very proactive on trying to protect minors, protect youth from these bad practices. So for instance, the Korean Ministry of Culture and the Korean Fair Trade Commission, they've created a standardized contract for artists and for trainees to sign. Everybody in the music industry has to use that standard contract. And when you read that contract, non-negotiable, they have clauses in there for exploitation. If you feel like you're being exploited, artists can get out. If you feel that you're struggling with mental health issues and you need time off, contractually you're allowed to. But to make a long story longer, to become a Korean music or K-pop star, there is no one formula. There is no one path. It doesn't have to be through a training system. Many artists are finding success in different ways, and that's an encouraging trend I hope to see more of.
The involvement of, so if you have watched that Netflix documentary or the little short on Explained, K-pop Explained, and they talk about the rise of K-popers, Soultagia boys, and these kind of things, and I wanted to ask about how, because I know there was a Korean push on culture, and I just wanted to know if that is still, if the government is still having a push, or whether it needs to, or whether it's now just over to the industry.
That show is actually really good, but there's actually one that's better on YouTube Originals. It's called K-pop Evolution. In full disclosure, I was a consultant and commentator on that, but it goes deeper, and it covers the wide range of the history, past, present, and all that. But the role of the Korean government in terms of its promotions of Hallyu, the Korean wave, and really the pop culture industry is really open to debate in terms of how much they helped or maybe possibly hurt. From my personal experience, working with the Korean government has been generally positive, but it hasn't always been smooth. But I attribute that to just sort of being part of the learning curve and part of the growing process. Obviously because the pop culture industries are very important to the Korean national economy, we get support that would be similar to protection and promotion initiatives that they might have for semiconductors or smartphones or automobiles. But the tricky thing about the pop culture industries, it's very tempting to somehow find a way to manipulate it for political purposes. And so in past Korean presidential administrations, the tampering of the pop culture industries through the government was a very sensitive subject. In fact, it led one of the presidents to go to jail when artists were put on blacklists. So I think the government is very aware and sensitive that there's only so much they can help and only so much they support. But the good thing and the good news is that industry has really taken the lead in terms of developing and going more global. But the government definitely helps where and when they can. For instance, during COVID, they provided a lot of assistance and subsidies for artists, movie theaters, companies that were struggling. The Korean government has been really good at sponsoring showcases and sending artists overseas to festivals. And so I think their help is definitely invaluable. But one of the things that I find incredibly valuable about the Korean government is the amount of research, the amount of data, and the amount of analysis they provide for the pop culture industries, because they treat what most people would consider hobbies, playing video games, listening to music, watching movies, watching TV. They treat it as industries. So we get data no different than if we were in Samsung making smartphones, or LG making televisions, or Hyundai making cars. And so having that kind of access to that kind of research and data only helps what we're doing in terms of growing the business further and farther.
With all the change going on with the metaverse, it's been very big. I work, and I believe my daughter and son will take a very active role in their lives. But with the change, for example, with a lot going on to metaverse, it seems like offline might get smaller, but with the arenas going through construction and everything, growing metaverse does not mean offline is supposed to get smaller, right? To make it simple, a lot of lots going on, but to make it most simple, my question would be, with the world changing so much, it's hard to see what's coming. It's really hard to see what's coming. What will be there and what will be sustainable and healthy?
That is the probably $1 trillion question. What is going to be the impact of Web3, metaverse, not just in music, but entertainment, but just lifestyle? It's something that I have to study every day, analyze every week, and everything I thought I knew, I have to reset, reboot, and restart because it's changing so fast. One of the things that I think that's exciting about the metaverse and Web3 stuff that's coming out of Korea, again, the fact that the technology companies are also now invested in the culture companies. When we look at the big tech giants in Korea, Naver or Kakao, they actually also own, operate management companies, TV production companies, making films or distributing and producing music. And so the fact is, they have a content pipeline for their tech platforms and tech expansion, and that kind of synergy you don't see in other major markets in the world. So the fact is that synergy is there. So Korea right now is moving very fast into this new space because they have access to the content, to the intellectual property, to make these theories real, to make the virtual real. And what it's doing is providing a lot of opportunities for people to come into the entertainment and media industry. I always thought video games were way over here, music was way over there, and TV's way over here. Now they're all converging. And I think ultimately, live experiences, live concerts will never go away, but if anything, with things like the metaverse, they're only going to be enhanced. And, again, BTS and other Korean music acts and companies during COVID were able to test, but more importantly, prove concept. While the rest of the world was struggling with, I can't tour, I can't play in front of a live audience, Korea figured out a way how to make really good lemonade from a bag of lemons during COVID. And so I think with, kids, as they're looking at potential careers, their new jobs and new careers and new majors that we never even thought of now becoming normal. I mean, when I entered this industry, if I tried to go to law school or business school, there were no classes on the entertainment industry. Now, they have MBA programs or law school programs specifically dedicated to the music industry or the TV or film industry. And so a lot has changed, a lot has evolved. But I think specifically in Korea, we're seeing a preview of the new now because of the culture, technology kind of paradigm here.